Welcome back, everyone, to the 7th explainer in our Psychology of Happiness series. Today, we're diving into a topic titled Positive Psychology and Wellbeing Practices. And honestly, I want to kick things off with a fact that completely blew my mind. Researchers actually suggest that while a chunk of our baseline happiness is just determined by genetics and our life circumstances, up to 40% of it is entirely within our control. 40%! That is driven by our daily intentional activities and habits. So if you've ever found yourself wondering how to move past just sort of surviving the day and instead truly optimize your happiness, build real resilience, and find a deeper sense of meaning, well, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're going to unpack the actual science behind what makes life truly worth living. Let's get into it. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today's masterclass. We'll be looking at 1, the science of flourishing; 2, character strengths and virtues; 3, daily practices for well-being; 4, deepening engagement and meaning; 5, holistic well-being and culture; and finally, 6, the limits of positivity. Starting off with Section 1, the science of flourishing, shifting the psychological paradigm. To really get this, we have to talk about a massive shift that completely changed how we view mental health. So think back to right after World War II. Psychology at that time became heavily and completely understandably devoted to healing mental illness. You had millions of veterans returning home with severe trauma, so the main focus was treating pathology and dysfunction, just fixing what was broken. And while traditional psychology made these enormous life-saving contributions, researchers like Peterson Seligman and Seligman Csikszentmihalyi eventually hit a wall. They started to realize that something really profound was missing from the equation. They argued that the science of the human mind shouldn't just be a study of weakness and damage. It absolutely needs to be a study of cultivating human strengths, virtues, and real happiness, too. Now, positive psychology doesn't deny suffering or ignore mental illness. Not at all. It's both corrective and constructive. The goal isn't just to help us crawl out of debilitating illness back to a state of baseline normality. It's about giving us the tools to leap from that baseline and actually flourish. But how do you actually measure something like flourishing? Well, Peterson Seligman developed something called the PERMA model. Think of it as a multidimensional framework. It proves that well-being isn't just one single thing. It's definitely not just slapping on a smile and pretending to be happy 24/7. It's actually a measurable combination of 5 distinct pillars. First, there's positive emotion. That's experiencing genuine joy, gratitude, and hope. Second is engagement. That means finding activities where you can just completely lose yourself in the present moment. Third is healthy, supportive relationships. Because, let's face it, we are fundamentally social creatures. We need each other. Fourth is meaning, which is all about belonging to and serving something much bigger than yourself. And finally, accomplishment, which is pursuing success and mastery just for the sake of it. When you put all 5 of these pillars together, it beautifully expands our definition of happiness far beyond just fleeting, superficial pleasure and turns it into something deeply sustainable. Moving on to Section 2, Character Strengths and Virtues, the Blueprint for Human Excellence. This brings us directly to the Blueprint for Human Excellence. Christopher Peterson and Peterson Seligman essentially wanted to create a positive counterpart to the standard diagnostic manuals used for psychological disorders. So instead of a thick book classifying what's wrong with us, they classified what's right with us. They identified 6 broad, universal virtues that pop up across cultures all over the world: wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. And beneath those broad virtues, they categorized 24 specific character strengths. For example, under humanity, you'll find things like kindness and love. Under courage, you've got bravery and persistence. Now, here is where it gets really actionable. Studies actually show that when you identify and actively use your signature strengths, the ones that feel the most natural and authentic to you, it increases your overall happiness and significantly reduces depressive symptoms over time. Think about it. If your signature strength is curiosity, and you intentionally channel that into, say, learning a new skill or really trying to understand a struggling coworker, you're instantly acting more ethically and meaningfully. You are literally building your own psychological armor in real time. Which leads us to Section 3. Daily practices for well-being, actionable interventions for your life. So, let's shift gears from the theory and talk about what you can literally start doing today. First up is gratitude. Gratitude is an absolute powerhouse in positive psychology because it forces your brain to shift attention away from what you lack to what you actually have. It moves you from a mindset of deficiency to abundance. Researchers Robert Emmons and Michael McCullough did this incredible study that perfectly highlights this. They divided people into two groups. One group was told to focus strictly on their daily hassles. Getting stuck in terrible traffic, dealing with rude people, all the annoying stuff. The other group was told to regularly count their blessings and just write down what they were grateful for. The results? The gratitude group reported drastically better moods, way more optimism, and, amazingly, even fewer physical symptoms like headaches or muscle soreness. It's a game changer. So I highly encourage you to try this. Just pause sometime today, think of 3 good things that happened, no matter how tiny, like a really perfect cup of coffee or a funny text from a friend, and write them down. Next up, we have acts of kindness. The researcher Sonia Lubomirsky found that intentional activities, like being kind to others, create deeply sustainable happiness. But why? Well, it turns out there is a fascinating biological loop happening here, often called the helper's high. When you do something kind for someone else, your brain gets flooded with neurochemicals like oxytocin and dopamine. Those literally lower your stress and boost your mood. So kindness truly benefits the giver just as much as the receiver. Whether you're helping a coworker out with a stressful project, volunteering your time, or honestly, just doing some really compassionate, uninterrupted listening for a friend who's having a hard day, you are building immense social connection and self-worth. By stepping outside of your own head to help someone else, you create this incredible upward spiral of well-being that lifts everybody up. Now, let's talk about mindfulness. As Jon Kabat-Zinn famously defines it, mindfulness is the awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. This is so absolutely crucial because without this kind of awareness, we are basically just sleepwalking through life, trapped in our automatic habits and knee-jerk emotional reactions. There's this profound idea, often attributed to the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl, that between a stimulus, what happens to you, and a response, how you react, there is a space. And in that space lies our ultimate power to choose. By paying attention on purpose and without constantly judging everything, you are consciously expanding that space. You hit the brakes on autopilot, and that space, that is exactly where your inner balance, your resilience, and your wisest choices actually live. And once mindfulness helps you actually notice the present moment, savoring is the practice that helps you deeply enjoy it. Savoring is basically the ability to notice, appreciate, and stretch out positive experiences. Because let's be real, we often have these perfectly pleasant moments throughout the day, but we completely miss them because we're distracted or rushing to the next thing. Think about your morning coffee again. Instead of just gulping it down while frantically scrolling through your emails, savoring means taking a brief pause. You genuinely feel the warmth of the mug in your hands, you smell the roast, you actually taste the flavor. You are deliberately training your brain's attention toward the richness of a good experience. And according to Barbara Fredrickson's Broaden and Build theory, these little positive emotions, they aren't just trivial. They actively build your long-term psychological and intellectual resources. They lay down the foundation for your resilience for years to come. Next, we need to look at optimism versus hope. Now, you might be thinking, aren't those the exact same thing? But psychologist C.R. Snyder makes this brilliant, highly practical distinction. Optimism is essentially just your tendency to expect favorable outcomes. It's that feeling of, things will eventually work out. But hope? Hope is an active, roll-up-your-sleeves cognitive system. It requires 2 distinct things. First, agency thinking, which is the pure will and determination to go after your goals. And second, pathways thinking, which is the actual ability to draw up the map to get there. For example, say you hit a massive roadblock on a big project. A strictly optimistic person just hopes the roadblock magically disappears. But a hopeful person, they use pathways thinking to immediately sketch out 3 new routes to bypass the roadblock entirely. Hopeful individuals are the ones who persist through extreme difficulty, precisely because they have the agency and the flexible plans to make things happen. Section 4. Deepening engagement and meaning. Moving beyond simple pleasure. This is where we transition past hedonic simple pleasure and get into the really deep eudaimonic concepts, the stuff that sustains us when life inevitably gets hard. Have you ever been so completely absorbed in what you were doing that you just totally lost track of time, like hours felt like minutes? That is a state called flow. Csikszentmihalyi explained that this incredible state of deep absorption happens when your skills are perfectly matched with a challenging task. He famously studied painters who would get so intensely engaged in their art that they would literally forget to eat or sleep. They weren't doing it for a paycheck. The work itself was the reward. In flow, you completely lose your self-consciousness and experience this profound intrinsic joy. Whether you're playing an instrument, writing code, rock climbing, or just doing a complex spreadsheet, flow transforms an ordinary activity into a deeply fulfilling experience.
But here's the thing, pleasure and even flow aren't quite enough to sustain deep well-being all on their own. As humans, we inherently crave meaning. Martin Seligman defines meaning as belonging to and serving something larger than the self. So how do we find that? Well, it starts by identifying your core values. Ask yourself, what would you gladly do for free? Or what injustices in the world make you angry enough that you feel compelled to fix them? By pinning down these values, writing out a life purpose statement, volunteering in your community, or simply finding a way to connect your mundane daily tasks to a larger goal, you build a kind of invincible buffer against life's hardest moments. The research consistently shows that a person can endure profound difficulty, failure, or even tragic loss and still maintain a deep baseline of well-being as long as their life is experienced as meaningful.
And a huge part of finding that peace and meaning involves learning the incredibly complex practice of forgiveness. Now, I want to be very, very clear here. Forgiveness absolutely does not mean denying that an injustice occurred. It doesn't mean invalidating your own pain, and it certainly does not mean accepting ongoing harmful behavior from someone else. Not at all. It is purely a psychological and moral process of reducing your own resentment. Peterson and Seligman actually include it as a character strength under temperance because holding on to chronic anger takes a terrifying physical toll on your body. When you endlessly ruminate on a grudge, it chronically elevates your cortisol levels, it spikes your heart rate, and it shoots your blood pressure up. Forgiveness is not a gift for the person who hurt you. It is a vital release of a destructive emotional and physical burden, done purely for your own health and freedom.
Section 5. Holistic Well-Being and Culture. Connecting mind, body, and tradition.
You know, positive psychology isn't just about what's invisibly happening inside your head. Our physical bodies and ancient cultural traditions play an absolutely vital role here. As researchers Pinedo and Don comprehensively reviewed, well-being is heavily reliant on our biology. Physical activity is quite literally a foundational pillar for happiness. Exercise triggers real, measurable biological changes. Even just 30 minutes of moderate activity like a brisk walk releases endorphins that rapidly improve your mood, regulate your stress hormones, and dramatically enhance your sleep quality. You simply cannot separate the health of the mind from the health of the body. If you want to flourish, your well-being practices have to include body-based habits.
And what's amazing is that these holistic ideas aren't just new inventions cooked up by modern science. A lot of these well-being practices have incredibly deep, ancient roots, particularly in Indian and yogic systems. The traditional paths of yoga offer a really striking parallel to positive psychology. Step 1 focuses on moral discipline, known as yama and niyama. Step 2 is physical stability, practiced through asana. Step 3 is breath regulation, known as pranayama, and Step 4 culminates in inner peace through meditation. Just think about how the yogic concept of santosha, which translates to deep inner contentment, so perfectly mirrors the modern evidence-based science of gratitude we were talking about earlier. True well-being has always been recognized across human history as this beautiful harmony of body, mind, society, morality, and spirit.
And finally, Section 6, the limits of positivity. A critical evaluation of the field.
Now, to truly understand this field, we have to take a nuanced, highly critical look at what positive psychology can, and very importantly, cannot do. We have to remember that happiness should never be reduced to just toxic positivity or good vibes only. Unrealistic positivity can dangerously gloss over very real suffering, poverty, and systemic injustice. We can never, ever use well-being practices to blame an individual for their unhappiness when that unhappiness is actually caused by structural inequality. Furthermore, well-being is defined very differently across the globe. While Western models might heavily emphasize individual joy and personal achievement, many collectivistic cultures define flourishing quite differently as social harmony, duty, and communal balance. And finally, these interventions are incredible tools, but they can never replace clinical diagnosis or professional therapy for severe mental health trauma. Positive psychology is meant to complement traditional treatments and supportive environments, not replace them. Because true well-being requires not just personal techniques, but supportive families and just institutions too. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this provocative question. How will you cultivate your own flourishing today? Are you going to write down 3 good things? Maybe you'll try a small act of kindness to spark that helper's high, or just simply focus on savoring a quiet moment with your afternoon coffee. The power to build that meaning is literally in your hands. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. If you found this breakdown helpful, please drop a like on this explainer, leave a comment down below with the flourishing practice you're going to try today, share this with someone who might benefit from a boost, and of course, hit that subscribe button for more focused learning. Keep flourishing, and I'll see you in the next one.